Normally how I make these videos, I have some type of mini script in terms of just notes of things I want to talk about. I record the video, and then while I like spot check the video, and when I edit it, play very limited editing on these things, and then in post, while it's rendering, I usually make the thumbnail. So I have no idea what I'm going to end up making a thumbnail, but I have some ideas and they're all pretty wild. What's going on? My name is Joe Lewis and I practice talking on the internet, and it's time to talk about the video in question. That is Jason Aldean and Try That in a Small Town. I've been kind of dodging this for a while, and by a while just a couple of weeks at this point, because I think of it, the song's only been out for like maybe if at most a month. But I was bored and in traffic, so I was like, you know what, let's just give it a listen. And I gotta tell you, it's a really cool song. um there's a lot going on, and then I did like a quick sort of listen to a couple of different commentaries on it and responses. And at first, I thought all of sort of the flashpoints of this story were memes. I just thought that I just thought they were memes. I couldn't believe that a group of people could be that careless in the constructing of a music video, and I was mistaken. So yeah, there's a lot going on there. I'm gonna give you kind of the cliff notes of my responses to this. I am about maybe 7 to 10 minutes removed from this sort of process. Let me walk you through the process, okay? So there's this like parade thing going on in the town over for me. I got stuck in it and I was just sitting there waiting. So I played the song, I gave it a couple of passes, like 2 or 3. Then when we were allowed to like cross over, because it like pretty much ended around like 11:30 or so, I pulled into my driveway and I played the music video, and I gave it like 2 or 3 passes as well. So this is maybe about me listening to this a total of like 10 times maximum. But here's the general thing, right? When you make songs about anything, lyrics point to stuff, and there's no way you can reasonably believe that this video is not pointing to the idea of mob violence. And mob violence is an aspect of small town culture, which is something. There's a lot of examples in the song that are just not even a lot of examples, just like it's very, very short in terms of lyrical content, but it's generally pointing to the idea of mob violence as an aspect of small town culture. And if we know how America is kind of constructed, small town culture can relate in most contexts, especially in the way that Jason Aldean, excuse me, is describing it, is essentially white culture. That one of the aspects of white culture in the United States is mob violence. And that mob violence can be due to a lot of things. It can be due to carelessness of the institution of police. It could also be complicity and complacency within the institution of police. And there's a lot of different things to that. And I think the reason why people are kind of pissed off is that Jason Aldean is not trying to say that that doesn't exist. In fact, he is pointing directly as a response to what you're seeing in cities and urban centers, which, if we know urban centers skew disproportionately non-white, then he's basically talking about minorities here and saying, if this type of explosion or outcry were to happen in a small town, we will fucking kill you. And not only will we kill you, we'll get away with it. And he's not even being subtle about it. That's why it's just kind of funny when I'm like, because glimpsed at a few different that was another thing I did. I glimpsed at like different sort of like just responses to it, and there's just a bunch of white folks who just don't understand. Like, and there's a bunch of black people that are just like, yeah, like, yeah. So it's just like, maybe a year or so ago or 2 years, I don't know, maybe this would have pissed me off, but this is just cartoonishly racist, and it's not even trying to be anything other than that. But the problem is that there's a truth in that there is small town mob violence that's used in small towns. And there's a lot of context to that. Like, you can point to Isaac Woodward, Mac Parker, Emmett Till, the Rosewood Massacre, the Wapato Race Riot. If I remember correctly, I'll put something in the description of all of the examples of mob violence in the United States, because it's pretty heavily documented. It's also pretty heavy documented that there's a lot of mob violence that happened because of racial tension and because of perceived transgressions towards the whites. And it's just a never-ending sea of historical context to that. So like when you write a song like this, you're trying to point to this idea that BLM and like sort of riots over the past 2-3 years, if you were to do these type of things in a small town, then these things would not be tolerated. And the things that he mentions in particular, the idea of like sucker punching someone on a sidewalk, carjacking somebody, I think he mentions robbing a liquor store, and just generally how he described unironically just acting a fool. It's bad. It's bad, bro. And I think it's really interesting with all of those things is that in the video, it backdrops to different examples. And when I'm first watching this, like the video at first pass, I'm thinking, yo, he's got to be careful, because if he points to all of these different examples and it's just non-white people doing these things that he's describing in the video and the song itself, he's gonna get in trouble. But he was smart. He interjected different white folks doing these things, in particular women. That's that's another thing. I'm not gonna tackle that part. The feminists can take care of that. I'm just working on the race part. But yeah, it's bad. It's just bad. And we have multiple examples in the United States of small town mob violence. And then even something else that he mentioned in the song, like the idea of like generational gun ownership, where like he got a gun that his granddad gave him, and then they said someday they're gonna round up. It's like, what? It's bad. It's bad. It's just bad. And I think like something that I'm not really interested in anymore in doing is just making a big outrage over overtly racialized things that are pointing to black people and trying to be like surprised, because it is true, like in the slice of small town American culture, there's a history of mob violence. Now, is there a lineage of mob violence? There's a lineage of mob violence towards black people. But I'm going to let books do that for me, of making the claim that, and there are books of this, by the way, I'm not going to make the claim that mob violence is something that points to white people as a matter of lineage. But I can definitely you can definitely probably make the argument, and people way smarter than me made this argument, that there is a lineage of mob violence in small towns. Who is the victim of that mob violence? You're going to let those scholars deal with that. But yeah, geez. I normally don't do this sort of like reaction of a video and stuff like that, but it was cartoonish racism. And I think my only concern in the long run is that like people are going to take cartoonish racism and try to like blow it out of proportion. But to me, it's just a Tuesday. Like Yeah, there's it shouldn't surprise you. A country singer is talking about the idea that in small towns, when there's people acting a fool or doing things that in the community wide or generally would be undesirable, then a mob might what's the word? A mob might come upon you and make sure you don't exist anymore. And there's just a bunch of examples of that. Now, what should Jason Aldean do? Probably nothing. He's probably fine. He just gave white nationalists and racists the new anthem of the decade, because you can plant this song at any point in history and from the 90s to now and it still holds up. So um a very interesting time and place for him to release this, but you know, hey, he's a singer, he's a country singer, he's doing the country singer thing, and you know, there's no reason to be, in my opinion, overtly outraged by this. You shouldn't be surprised at this. Like, when somebody tells you the truth, you believe them. So yeah, he's not wrong, and history is on his side. Now, I don't know how you could be in support of this song while also in support of police, because in all of these, in both of these situations that he describes as this dichotomy, you could say that there's apathy towards policing. In small towns, he's basically implying that police will allow you just to murder someone. And then in the cities, he's saying that the police will allow you to murder someone. But the content of that is very, very different. If you don't want to go as far as to say murder, you can say, like, yeah, in both of this dichotomy, it's implying that the police are so apathetic to violence that you can carry out violence towards somebody and not be held accountable for your actions. And then it's up to, in this case, in the small town context, it's up to the community to do something about it. And the community will do something about it. But both of those are the root of like police apathy, or complacency or complacency, however you want to describe it. But yeah, it's a wild video. It's funny. Like, I think if you've got 3 minutes, give it a listen. But yeah, it's not trying to be subtle. Um, if you cross the line, it won't take long. It is just a gem of it's a gem. It's a country artifact that it's not gonna age well when it comes to the history of race in the United States and this sort of like flashpoint. It's gonna be a little relic that we're gonna hold on to. Maybe Jason Aldean will dodge the allegations. Putting it at the Maury County Courthouse for that music video does not help his case. I want to believe that he's just careless, but you know, he gave people fuel, so have fun with that. I had another video planned. I'll probably do a twofer where I'm just gonna record that one right after this one and then post that a little later this week. But yeah, with that being said, hopefully this made sense to, if you want to sort of get the take. The video points to mob violence, in particular mob violence in small towns. This is a direct connection to racial terror and terrorism in small towns in the United States. And there's a bunch of examples of that, of mob violence done by white mobs because of white people, quote unquote, acting a fool. And whether that acting a fool was justifiable don't ask the courts, because a lot of these people got acquitted. But generally speaking, it's a lot of just puffed up or trumped up charges and other things. And this video is just an artifact of that truth that exists within American towns, particularly American small towns. And it's just a cultural artifact, and that's all you really can do with it. It's cartoonishly racist. So have fun. You're going to give black people their TikTok puff pieces, flexing their intellectual muscles about walking through why it's bad. So don't be surprised at any of the content there. And yeah, and if you're a white nationalist, a supremacist, or racist, then you get a new anthem. All right, guys. That's all I got for now. I'll see you soon.